Before you drift into sleep tonight, imagine watching an entire nation transform, not in loud, dramatic bursts, but slowly, patiently, the way dawn quietly spreads over a sleeping landscape. Ever wondered how modern China, home to more than 1 billion people, reshaped itself within just a few decades? Tonight, we explore that journey, not as a political story, but as a gentle reflection on human progress, creativity, and patient planning. Welcome, dear and thank you for joining us once again on Go to Sleep Historian, your quiet corner of the night, where history is told softly, and where learning becomes as calming as drifting clouds. If this is your first time here, you are warmly invited to subscribe. And if this story brings you peace tonight, a like, comment, or share helps our little nighttime community grow. As always, tonight's video comes in 2 peaceful parts. Our spoken story first, and then, once the narration ends, 1 full hour of relaxing sleep music will gently guide you deeper into rest. Tonight, we explore modern China's rise. A quiet, thoughtful journey through one of the world's most remarkable transformations, from early reforms and patient planning to high-speed rail, digital communities, cultural renewal, and future vision. We'll walk softly through each moment, letting history settle like calm evening rain. So take a slow breath, find a comfortable position, and let your mind drift as we begin. There are moments in history, dear listener, when a civilization feels as though it is standing at the crossroads of time. Not in a rush, not in panic, but in a quiet, reflective pause. China, at the beginning of the 20th century, was in such a moment. A vast land with ancient traditions, timeless philosophies, and memories stretching back thousands of years, now found itself facing a world that was changing faster than ever before. Imagine a lantern glowing softly in the early morning mist. Its light flickers, unsure yet persistent. That is how China's dawn of the new century began, gentle, uncertain, and searching for direction. For nearly 200 years, the old imperial order had shaped the rhythm of daily life. The Qing dynasty, the last of China's long line of dynasties, had ruled with a mixture of tradition and ritual, its emperors believed to be chosen by heaven. But by the early 1900s, this once great system was growing fragile, not in the dramatic way of stories filled with conflict, but in the slow, quiet way that old structures sometimes fade, like an ancient temple gradually being reclaimed by wind and rain. In the countryside, farmers still rose with the sun, tending the same fields their ancestors had cared for centuries before. In small towns, elders gathered to sip tea and discuss the classics, reciting lines from Confucius and Menaeus with gentle pride. Yet, beyond these peaceful scenes, changes were stirring. New inventions from distant lands, railways, telegraphs, modern schools were knocking softly at China's door, carrying unfamiliar ideas about society, progress, and governance. In the year 1911, a quiet but significant transformation occurred. The imperial system, which had guided China for more than 2,000 years, gracefully stepped aside, and in its place emerged something new: the Republic of China. It was not an easy shift, nor an entirely smooth one, but it was hopeful. For the first time, China imagined itself as a modern nation-state, ready to learn from the world while still honoring its ancient roots. But like any beginning, it came with uncertainty. Leaders debated the best path forward. Scholars discussed philosophy and reform. Villagers listened, unsure but curious, as news drifted along dusty roads and through bustling marketplaces. It wasn't a time of clear answers, rather a time of searching, of reflection, of slow understanding. Picture a scholar in a small study room, surrounded by books, old and new. A candle flickers beside him. On one side of the desk lies bamboo-bound classics of Chinese thought. On the other, newly translated works from Europe and Japan. This scholar, like many across the country, wonders, how can China honor its past while stepping into the modern world? How can tradition and innovation walk side by side? These questions echoed throughout the nation, and though the answers were not yet clear, their gentle emergence marked the beginning of China's modernization journey. In the cities Beijing, Shanghai, and Wuhan new schools were founded. Young men and women, for the first time in centuries, studied science, engineering, mathematics, and political philosophy in structured classrooms. The language of instruction shifted. Lessons became more practical, and knowledge from abroad became part of daily learning. A quiet intellectual awakening had begun. Meanwhile, a cultural movement known as the New Culture Movement started to stir. Its leaders were not warriors or political figures, but writers, poets, and educators. Through essays and journals, they encouraged simpler language, open discussion, and new ideas about humanism and social reform. They believed that understanding the world could be as important as understanding ancient texts. Their tone was gentle, but their influence was deep, rippling through universities and into the hearts of young people eager to build a modern China. Across the countryside, life changed more slowly. Rural families lived much as they always had. Yet, even as subtle transformations appeared. New farming tools reached distant villages. Roadways and rail lines connected quiet towns to bustling ports. Postal services delivered letters that carried news, stories, and possibilities from cities far away. It wasn't dramatic, but it was steady. A slow weaving of China's traditional world with the threads of modernity. By the mid-20th century, China once again stood at a turning point. In 1949, after years of upheaval, the People's Republic of China was established. A new government, a new system, and a new vision emerged. But instead of focusing on conflict, let us focus on atmosphere. The sense of beginning, of rebuilding, of discovering a new identity. People across the country looked forward with both hope and uncertainty. Schools expanded. Literacy campaigns reached villages that had never before seen printed textbooks. And healthcare efforts began touching communities far from the cities. China felt like a vast garden being tended. New paths laid, new seeds planted, new possibilities nurtured one careful step at a time. Still, China remained largely isolated from the global community, moving cautiously as it searched for its direction. But this period of introspection, though difficult, allowed the nation to develop foundations that would later support one of the most remarkable transformations of the modern era. And so, as we close this first chapter, imagine a gentle breeze moving across China's wide landscapes, from the desert dunes of the northwest to the soft rice fields of the south. Imagine millions of individuals living quiet lives, each one part of a story much larger than themselves, a story of transition, resilience, and slow awakening. China, in these early decades of the 20th century, was not yet the global powerhouse we know today. It was a nation, learning, adapting, reflecting, and preparing gently, steadily, quietly, for the transformative chapters ahead. The early decades of the 20th century drifted onward, and China, though still searching for clarity, began to feel a quiet stirring of new thoughts, small at first, like gentle ripples forming on a still lake. These were not loud movements or sudden shifts. They were soft awakenings, carried by the pens of writers, the questions of students, and the conversations echoing through school halls and tea houses. If you listen closely, you can almost hear them. Ideas moving like a distant breeze through bamboo leaves. In the growing cities, young people walked two newly formed classrooms each morning, their textbooks tucked under their arms. But these books were not only filled with the ancient classics of Confucius and Mencius, as their parents once studied. Instead, pages now revealed fresh topics: physics, chemistry, world geography, modern literature, and political philosophy. Translations flowed into China from Japan, Europe, and America, introducing unfamiliar concepts: democracy, science, rationalism, and modern citizenship. Students gathered in dormitory rooms late at night, whispering about the world beyond China's borders. They spoke of inventions transforming daily life, elsewhere electric lights glowing in distant cities, machines that stitched fabric with astonishing speed, and railways that crossed continents. These conversations did not dismiss China's long heritage. Instead, they questioned how the old and the new might coexist. For many, it felt as though the past and future were meeting in the same room, sharing tea, exchanging cautious glances, and gradually learning to understand one another. One of the most influential waves of thought came during what historians call the New Culture Movement. But let us explore it with a gentle lens, free of conflict, focusing instead on its hopeful spirit. Imagine university halls filled with warm afternoon light. Teachers stand before chalkboards, speaking with soft conviction about the importance of clear language, accessible knowledge, and social progress. Their voices are calm, steady, and full of purpose. They encourage curiosity, inviting students to question customs, explore new literature, and imagine alternative futures. Magazines and journals circulated widely, filled with essays written in a modern, simplified form of Chinese. Written language, once beautiful but difficult, slowly became more accessible to everyday people. This subtle shift making reading, Esau, was one of the quiet turning points of modern China. When more people can read, more people can dream. And when more people can dream, change is never far behind. In the coastal city of Shanghai, cafes and bookshops became gathering places for writers who hoped to shape a modern cultural identity. They wrote about equality, scientific thinking, and the need to unify the nation through knowledge. Their intentions were earnest, their tone hopeful. They did not seek to erase China's past. Instead, they sought to illuminate a path where tradition and modernity walked side by side, each offering something valuable. Meanwhile, in Beijing, students strolled through university courtyards shaded by old ginkgo trees, discussing how China could renew itself. The conversations were thoughtful rather than radical. They spoke of improving schools, encouraging literacy, and adopting scientific mindsets. These ideas drifted outward like seeds carried by the wind. Some landed in newspapers, inspiring readers. Others reached rural areas through traveling teachers who brought with them stories of a world changing beyond the mountains and rivers. Across the countryside, the pace of life remained slow and familiar. Farmers tended their fields with the same careful rhythm as generations before them. But even subtle changes took root. New farming tools made their way into remote villages. Community schools began teaching basic reading and arithmetic. Children, who once learned solely from family elders, now sat in simple wooden classrooms, reciting lessons from worn chalk. The atmosphere was quiet, but filled with promise. Although China was still fragmented in governance and identity during these decades, a shared cultural awareness began to grow. More and more people felt connected by the idea that the country was entering a new era. Yes, but rich with potential. This sense of collective awakening, Tugendle, became one of the most important foundations for China's eventual rise. But not all changes came from abroad. China also looked inward, rediscovering strength in its ancient philosophies. Thinkers re-examined Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhist teachings, asking how their timeless wisdom could shape a modern society. Confucian values of harmony and duty were reconsidered in new contexts. Taoist ideas of balance and natural transformation offered comfort and guidance during uncertain times. Buddhism's teachings of compassion and mindfulness became sources of calm reflection for many. In this way, China's intellectual movement was not a rejection of its heritage. It was a blending, old and new, intertwined like intertwining branches of a tree, forming a canopy under which the nation could think, breathe, and grow toward the future. Newspapers became a central part of everyday life. Vendors shouted headlines on busy streets, and families gathered in the evenings to read aloud the latest articles. For many, this was their first glimpse into a rapidly modernizing world. Even in humble tea shops, patrons leaned over wooden tables, discussing editorials that proposed new directions for the country. These discussions were not loud. They were thoughtful, reflective, filled with hopes for a China that could stand strong in a changing world. By the late 1910s and early 1920s, young Chinese who had studied abroad began returning home. They brought with them the experiences of distant countries where factories hummed through the night, where city lights glowed into the early morning, and where societies debated their own futures with confidence. These returning scholars gently introduced new teaching methods, new scientific concepts, and new administrative ideas that were gradually adopted in schools and local governments across China. All these subtle forces, the students, the writers, the translated books, the returning scholars, the simplified language, the new schools, and the rediscovery of classical wisdom formed the seeds of an extraordinary transformation. Quiet, steady, patient, just like seeds beneath soil that remain unseen for a time. These ideas needed the right moment to germinate. And as we close this chapter, imagine China in the soft glow of twilight. Lanterns flicker outside small shops. The air is peaceful. From open windows, you can hear the voices of students reading aloud, teachers preparing lessons, and families discussing the possibilities of a new century. The seeds of change have been planted, and soon they will grow into something remarkable. As the mid-20th century unfolded, China once again found itself at a quiet but monumental turning point. After decades filled with searching, shifting, and imagining new futures, a new chapter began in 1949 with the founding of the People's Republic of China. It was not a simple change of government, but a moment when the entire nation paused, took a slow breath, and sensed that a different path lay ahead. Imagine that moment, like the first light of dawn rising over a vast landscape. The sky is pale, the world still, and millions of people look toward the horizon, wondering what this new day might bring. It was a time filled with uncertainty, yes, yet also with hope, determination, and the quiet longing for stability. China had emerged from a period of hardship and division. Villages had been separated by distance, cities burdened by economic struggle, and families scattered by the tides of history. Now, for the first time in many years, there was a shared feeling, a desire to rebuild, to reconnect, and to create a foundation that could support future generations. In the early years of this new era, leaders focused on addressing the most basic needs of the people. Think of simple, everyday things: food, shelter, literacy, community. The country's resources were limited, yet the determination to improve life was strong. Across the countryside, teams of workers traveled from village to village, introducing new farming techniques, surveying land, and helping rural families organize their harvests. Tools were simple, progress slow, but the intention behind these efforts was sincere: to help lift millions out of hardship, one careful step at a time. Education became a central focus. Schools that had once served only a small portion of the population began opening their doors to children from all walks of life. Imagine small classrooms with wooden desks, chalkboards covered in characters, and students wearing hand-stitched clothes, lining forward eagerly to read new words and solve simple arithmetic. Teachers walked from village to village, sometimes traveling long distances to bring education to remote communities. Literacy campaigns encouraged adults to learn as well, introducing reading materials written in plain, accessible language. Even those who had spent their entire lives in the fields now held books in their hands, tracing characters carefully with their fingers. Healthcare, too, began reaching places that had long been underserved. Simple clinics appeared in towns that had never before seen a trained doctor. Basic medicines, vaccinations, and health lessons quietly improved life expectancy and reduced disease. These were humble beginnings, but they formed the first threads of a national network that would grow in the decades ahead. Meanwhile, China also began its early steps toward industrialization. Factories, still modest compared to those in more developed nations, hummed gently in growing cities. Workers learned how to operate machinery, produce textiles, and assemble basic equipment. These industries were not yet the vast manufacturing centers China would one day become known for, but they laid the groundwork brick by brick, shift by shift, for future economic transformation. In the 1950s and 1960s, China remained largely closed off from much of the outside world. This isolation meant fewer foreign influences and limited global trade, but it also created a unique period of introspection. The nation looked inward, relying on its own scholars, workers, and planners to develop strategies for growth. Rural communities, in particular, became the focus of long-term development projects. Roads were built, irrigation systems improved, and vast regions began to modernize at their own steady pace. During this time, China also invested in building a strong foundation of scientific and technological capability. Universities, though still recovering and reorganizing, began training new generations of engineers, doctors, and laboratories, more modest, but full of enthusiasm, worked to develop new techniques in agriculture, chemistry, and medicine. Though progress was gradual, These efforts planted seeds that would later blossom into remarkable achievements in science and industry. Urban life during these decades moved at a calm, measured rhythm. Streets were busy but orderly. Bicycles lined up outside workplaces, and families gathered in the evenings to listen to radio broadcasts that discussed national development, public health, and stories of exemplary citizens. Parks filled with people practicing Tai Chi, children playing traditional games, and elders strolling slowly beneath willow trees. Despite economic limitations, community bonds remained strong, and daily life carried a certain steady resilience. In the countryside, winters were quiet and peaceful. Smoke curled softly from clay chimneys, and families warmed themselves around small stoves. Spring brought new planting seasons, with farmers working in fields that stretched toward distant mountains. Summer nights were filled with the hum of insects and the laughter of children chasing fireflies. Autumn harvests brought communities together in shared celebration. Even if the yields were modest, life remained simple, but the gradual improvements, new tools, new roads, new schools were deeply felt. Throughout the 1960s and early 1970s, China continued to navigate internal challenges and shifting priorities. Yet even in difficult times, certain efforts persisted beneath the surface. The expansion of basic education, the development of public health systems, and the strengthening of national infrastructure. These efforts, though not dramatic, were essential. They formed the stable foundation that would later allow China to take bold steps toward modernization. And then, toward the late 1970s, something subtle began to change. A new openness crept into conversations among scholars, urban planners, and government officials. Economic theories from abroad were quietly discussed. Foreign visitors, rare for decades, began to arrive in small numbers. Chinese students and diplomats started traveling abroad again, returning with new perspectives and fresh ideas. The world, once distant, was beginning to feel closer. This period, stretching from 1949 into the late 1970s, was not defined by rapid growth or international recognition. Instead, it was defined by foundations, by building essential systems, by slowly elevating literacy, healthcare, agriculture, and industry, by creating stability where there had been uncertainty, and by preparing patiently for a transformation that had not yet fully revealed itself. As this chapter closes, imagine China once more at the edge of change. The sun has not yet risen on its era of rapid economic growth, but the sky is beginning to brighten. The nation stands steady, grounded by decades of quiet effort, ready for a new direction that will soon reshape its future and the world's. As the 1970s gently drew to a close, China stood before a quiet threshold. Decades of introspection, rebuilding, and slow, careful progress had brought the nation to a point where a new direction was possible, a direction that would transform it in ways few could have imagined. The world around China had changed dramatically. New technologies illuminated distant skylines, global trade had woven nations together, and scientific innovation pushed the boundaries of everyday life. China, watchful and patient, sensed that the moment had come to step forward. At the center of this new dawn was a figure whose influence would shape the next era with remarkable subtlety: Deng Xiaoping. He was not a loud or dramatic leader. He did not seek grand displays or sweeping public speeches. Instead, he carried a calm, thoughtful presence, a man who believed deeply in the power of practicality, careful planning, and the steady rhythm of progress. In many ways, his leadership style reflected the tone of the transformation he would guide. Measured, intentional, and quietly profound. Imagine, for a moment, a calm river at sunrise. The water is still, yet beneath the surface, currents move with purpose, shifting gently toward new horizons. This is how China's transformation began. Not with noise, but with clarity. Deng Xiaoping observed the global landscape and recognized that for China to prosper, it needed to engage with the world, to learn from it, and to adapt. Yet he also knew that the country needed stability, balance, and a path that respected its unique identity. In 1978, a series of thoughtful discussions and meetings marked the beginning of what would become known as reform and opening up. It was a phrase simple in words, but immense in significance. Reform meant adjusting old systems, experimenting with new methods, and allowing fresh ideas to take root. Opening up meant inviting global knowledge, foreign investment, and international partnerships into China's economic and social development. Together, these changes would gently reorient the nation toward growth, innovation, and a wider global presence. Yet, it is important to imagine this moment in its true atmosphere. Not rushed, not chaotic, but deliberate and contemplative. China did not leap into a new era. It stepped into it, gradually. The early conversations focused on agriculture, where small but meaningful adjustments were tested. Farmers in various regions were allowed to manage their own plots more independently, deciding what to grow and how to allocate their harvests. This small shift ignited something unexpected. Productivity increased, communities prospered, and people began to imagine bigger possibilities. After witnessing the quiet success in rural areas, leaders turned their attention to industry and trade. They realized that China could learn from the experiences of other nations, especially those that had transformed their economies within a single generation. But rather than adopting foreign models blindly, China chose a path of experimentation. They would try new economic approaches in specific areas first, observe the results carefully, and then expand only what worked. This practical, patient mindset became the soul of the reform era. During this time, Deng Xiaoping introduced a simple yet powerful idea. It does not matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice. In its gentle imagery, this saying captured the heart of his philosophy. What mattered was not ideology or labels. What mattered was results, well-being, and progress. This flexible thinking allowed China to innovate without abandoning stability. In cities along the southern coast, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Shantou, and Xiamen, something extraordinary began to unfold. These places were chosen for a bold experiment, the creation of special economic zones. But at the start, they were far from the modern skylines we know today. Shenzhen, for example, was little more than a modest fishing town, quiet and unassuming. Yet, the decision to develop it became symbolic of China's entire transformation. Humble beginnings evolving into something remarkable. Within these zones, new rules allowed international companies to invest, local industries to grow, and trade to flow more freely. The zones became small windows through which the world could enter China, and through which China could observe the world. Factories emerged, ports expanded, and innovation began to hum gently in the background. Over time, more people moved to these areas, drawn by opportunity. What started as an experiment grew into a model that would inspire development across the entire nation. But even as these changes unfolded, China maintained a calm, steady approach. Nothing was done hurriedly. Each new idea was tested. Each policy was reviewed. Each step was taken with the awareness that the well-being of millions depended on careful balance. China's leaders understood that development must not disrupt social stability or cultural values. Thus, progress moved forward like a thoughtful conversation, never rushed, always mindful. Meanwhile, international engagement blossomed slowly. China welcomed visitors, scholars, and business leaders from abroad. Students began traveling to universities in the United States, Europe, and Japan, returning with fresh knowledge and new perspectives. These exchanges were like quiet bridges, connecting China to the wider world, allowing ideas to flow in both directions. For the first time in a long while, China was opening its windows, letting in new air, new light, new possibilities. Throughout the early 1980s, factories expanded, ports grew busier, and city skylines began to rise. Rural families found new opportunities as agriculture modernized, and urban workers discovered new professions emerging around them. The transformation was not uniform. Some regions developed faster than others, but the overall momentum was unmistakable. A gentle yet powerful current was guiding the nation toward a future of greater prosperity and global connection. And through it all, Deng Xiaoping remained steady. He did not micromanage every detail. Instead, he provided guiding principles: seek truth from facts, err often inside, encouraging leaders at every level to look at results, listen to communities, and remain grounded in reality. This philosophy helped maintain clarity during times of uncertainty and allowed reforms to expand naturally when they proved successful. By the mid-1980s, China had entered a new era, One defined not by isolation, but by engagement, not by rigidness, but by adaptability, not by stagnation, but by a sense of moving forward. The quiet changes that began in the late 1970s now reached households across the country. People felt hope rising in their daily lives. A new job opportunity, a new school, a new road, connecting their town to the next province. As we close this chapter, imagine standing on a hill overlooking one of China's early special economic zones during its humble beginnings. The sky glows softly at dusk. Construction cranes rest silently, and distant lights shimmer across a developing skyline. The air is warm, filled with the promise of tomorrow. China is changing, not loudly, not abruptly, but with calm determination and a vision shaped by patience, wisdom, and thoughtful leadership. As China stepped into the early 1980s, a quiet but extraordinary experiment began to take shape along its southern shores. The world at large barely noticed at first, and even within China, many people were unsure of what it would mean. Yet this moment, understated, steady, and cautiously hopeful, would soon become one of the most important turning points in the nation's modern rise. It began not in Beijing, nor in Shanghai, but in places that were once little more than fishing villages and small trading ports. These places would be known as Special Economic Zones, or SEZs. Imagine the coastline of southern China in the late 1970s. The air is warm and humid, the sea stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Forested hills roll gently toward small clusters of homes built from simple materials. In the evenings, villagers walk along unpaved paths as the sun sets in shades of gold and crimson. Life here is quiet, humble, almost untouched by the rapid modernization happening in cities elsewhere in the world. It is hard to imagine that these very landscapes would soon become the focal points of China's economic transformation. When China's leaders began discussing reform and opening up, they understood that experimentation would be key. The country was too vast, too diverse, and too populated for sudden national changes. What was needed was a controlled environment, places where new ideas could be tested safely, lessons learned carefully, and progress measured gently. And so, a decision was made. A handful of coastal areas would be designated as zones where foreign investment, new regulations, and modern business practices could be introduced. Shenzhen was the first. At that time, it was a quiet town, neighboring Hong Kong, known mostly for its fishing industry and peaceful rural life. But it had one unique advantage: its proximity to a global financial hub. Leaders believed that if Shenzhen opened its doors even slightly to the world, the knowledge, technology, and investment flowing through Hong Kong might naturally seep across the border like a soft tide. In 1980, Shenzhen was officially established as China's first special economic zone. The announcement did not bring fireworks or loud celebrations. Instead, it sparked a gentle curiosity. Villagers wondered what this meant for their community. Local officials studied new policies carefully, trying to understand how to guide development. Across China, people listened to radio broadcasts describing this new experiment, unsure but hopeful. Almost immediately, the landscape began to change, but not abruptly. Construction teams arrived, clearing land with careful hands. Simple roads were built, followed by modest factories and warehouses. The skyline remained low, but slowly grew upward. Workers from nearby provinces traveled to Shenzhen in search of opportunity, bringing with them dreams of steady work and a better future. For many, it was their first time leaving their hometowns, and they arrived with a mix of nervousness and excitement. Foreign companies, curious but cautious, began sending representatives to explore the new zone. They walked through freshly built industrial parks, toured facilities still smelling of new concrete, and spoke with local officials eager to collaborate. These interactions were polite, slow, and deliberate. The goal was not rapid growth, but gradual understanding. Both sides needed time to learn, to trust, to adapt. As the months passed, Shenzhen began to hum gently with activity. Machines whirred softly through the night. Lights glowed from factory windows long after sunset. Shipping containers, once rare sights here, started appearing at small ports, carrying goods across seas and bringing new materials in return. Though the city was still far from a metropolis, the rhythm of modernization had begun. Encouraged by Shenzhen's early progress, China designated additional special economic zones, Shuhai, Shantou, and Xiamen. Each of these places had its own character. Shuhai near Macau became known for its scenic coastline and peaceful development. Shantou, with its deep historical ties to overseas Chinese communities, hoped to attract investment from families with roots abroad. Xiamen, an ancient port city facing Taiwan, carried a long history of trade and cultural exchange. In all four zones, the atmosphere was similar. Patient optimism, rather than overwhelming communities with sudden changes. Development unfolded like a carefully tended garden. New industries were planted, nurtured, and allowed to grow only when conditions were right. Local workers received training. Young entrepreneurs tested new ideas. Engineers and planners experimented with modern building designs, public utilities, and transport systems. One of the most important aspects of these zones was flexibility. They were allowed to try policies not yet adopted elsewhere in China. Tax incentives for foreign companies, simplified business procedures, and special legal frameworks designed to encourage investment. These were small adjustments by global standards, but immense steps for a country that had spent decades practicing central planning. And the results spoke quietly, but convincingly. Factories in Shenzhen began producing goods not only for domestic use, but for international markets. Clothes, electronics, toys, tools, items made by Chinese hands began appearing in shops across Asia, Europe, and the United States. As exports grew, so did confidence. China realized that it could, through careful steps, become part of the global supply chain. Yet despite these achievements, life within the SEZs maintained a certain calm. Workers lived in dormitories, sharing meals in simple cafeterias. Families strolled together along newly paved streets in the evenings, watching construction cranes silhouetted against the sky. Local markets remained vibrant, selling fresh vegetables, tea, seafood, and handmade crafts. Even as skyscrapers slowly rose, the heart of daily life retained its gentleness. By the mid-1980s, the success of the special economic zones had become undeniable. More investors arrived, more factories opened, more young people moved south in search of opportunity. The zones became classrooms in which China learned how to balance tradition with modernity, planning with innovation, and self-reliance with openness. Shenzhen, once a quiet fishing village, grew at a pace that seemed almost poetic, a symbol not of sudden disruption, but of the quiet power of long-term vision. It would become one of the fastest-growing cities in the world. Yet its earliest days were marked by modesty, caution, and hopeful experimentation. As the chapter draws to a close, imagine standing on the shore of Shenzhen. During those early years, the sea breeze is gentle. The sound of distant machinery blends softly with the waves. Lights flicker across new buildings rising from once empty fields. The future is forming not loudly, not suddenly, but like a tide advancing inch by inch, reshaping the coastline of a nation. The special economic zones were more than policy experiments. They were the quiet engines that began turning China toward the world, setting in motion a journey that would continue for decades to come. As the 1980s unfolded, the quiet energy rising from China's coastal special economic zones began to ripple outward across the nation. Factories were humming, ports were opening, and new ideas were taking gentle root in classrooms, offices, and community halls. But China's transformation, still in its early stages, was not meant to remain contained within its borders. A new chapter was about to begin, one in which China would slowly, carefully, and thoughtfully step onto the global stage. It didn't happen overnight. In fact, it happened the way morning dew gathers on leaves softly, gradually, quietly. China sensed that to grow stronger, it needed to understand the world, and allow the world to understand it. But this opening had to be done with care, balance, and patience. After decades of isolation, every new connection felt like opening a window that had long been closed. Imagine a cool breeze drifting into a room that has been sealed for years. The air carries unfamiliar scents, different temperatures, and fresh possibilities. This is what opening up meant for China. A chance to breathe, to learn, to engage, and to connect with nations far across oceans and continents. It began with simple exchanges. Delegates visited foreign countries, observing their factories, ports, highways, and universities. They studied everything from management styles to transportation systems, taking notes, not to copy, but to understand. These early trips were quiet, respectful, filled with careful listening. For many officials, it was their first time leaving China. Standing in the midst of busy global cities, they saw both the opportunities and the challenges that modernization would bring. Meanwhile, foreign visitors began arriving in China as well. Business people, educators, scientists, and journalists stepped onto Chinese soil with curiosity in their eyes. They walked through Shenzhen's emerging industrial parks, toured schools, and met with local leaders who spoke with steady confidence about the nation's plans. Many visitors were surprised. China was not moving recklessly, it was moving thoughtfully. Joint ventures, partnerships between Chinese companies and foreign firms began to appear. These early collaborations were modest, but significant. A Japanese electronics company partnered with a Chinese factory to produce home appliances. A European engineering firm helped build modern transportation projects. American technology companies shared training and expertise. These exchanges were bridges quietly built, carefully tested, and slowly extended. China's leaders also worked to rebuild diplomatic relationships that had weakened over the previous decades. Embassies reopened, flights resumed, and cultural events introduced foreign visitors to Chinese art, music, and traditions. These connections did not simply help the economy, they helped the world see China not as a distant mystery, but as a nation with deep history, rich culture, and new ambitions. One of the most symbolic milestones came in 2001, when China joined the World Trade Organization, known as the WTO. But let us remember this moment, not through technical language, but through atmosphere. Imagine a grand hall, filled with representatives from all over the world. Delegates in suits sit beneath warm lights, listening as China is welcomed into a global community of trade and cooperation. There are no loud celebrations, just polite applause, a sense of gravity, and an understanding that this step would reshape the global economy for decades to come. By joining the WTO, China signaled to the world that it was ready to participate in global commerce on a deeper level. Markets opened further, regulations became clearer, trade increased dramatically, factories expanded, technology accelerated, and new industries began to bloom. Cities like Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Tianjin experienced waves of investment, transforming their skylines into forests of steel and glass. Yet even as China entered the global marketplace, it remained mindful of balance. Leaders frequently reminded the nation of Deng Xiaoping's guiding principle: hide your strength, be to your time, and focus on doing your own work well. This was not about secrecy, it was about humility. China's goal was not to boast, but to grow steadily, responsibly, and sustainably. The impact of global integration reached deeply into everyday life. Students who once dreamed only of local opportunities now spoke of studying abroad. Families who had never tasted foreign foods found supermarkets carrying chocolates, biscuits, and fruits from distant lands. Travelers could watch films from Hollywood, Europe, and Korea, while Chinese dramas and music quietly found audiences overseas. For many, these changes felt like a gentle widening of the world. Not overwhelming, not disorienting, just a gradual expansion of possibilities. In manufacturing, China became known as the world's workshop, but behind the phrase lies a more human story. Millions of workers waking early each morning, bicycles filling factory gates, families finding new stability through steady wages, and entire communities being lifted out of poverty. The sound of progress was not loud or mechanical, it was the soft murmur of people working, hoping, and building better lives. Ports grew larger, their cranes lifting containers like patient giants. Ships carrying goods from China sailed to Africa, Europe, the Americas, and beyond. And on their return journeys, they brought back more than materials, they brought knowledge, experience, and inspiration. At the same time, China began hosting international events that invited the world to witness its progress firsthand. Economic forums, trade expos, cultural festivals, and scientific conferences filled modern halls with people from every continent. The air buzzed with languages, ideas, and shared curiosity. One could walk through a major Chinese city in the late 1990s or early 2000s and hear a blend of local dialects mixed with English, Japanese, French, and Korean. Coffee shops hosted casual meetings between Chinese entrepreneurs and foreign investors. Universities welcomed international students who hoped to understand China's growing role in the world. These moments, gentle and human, were the true signs of China joining the global community. By the time the 21st century arrived, China was no longer observing the world from a distance. It was participating quietly, confidently, steadily. Its economy had become an engine not only for itself, but for global trade. Its cities had become hubs of innovation and culture, and its people, once bound by geographical and political limitations, now felt connected to a wider world. And yet, through all these changes, China held on to something essential: a sense of patience, a belief that true development takes time, a commitment to stability, a steady, calm approach that allowed the nation to rise without losing its balance. As we close this chapter, imagine a ship leaving a Chinese port at night. The harbor lights shimmer across the water. Cranes stand like silent guardians, and the ship glides forward slow. Powerful, purposeful. This is China joining the world. A movement, not of haste, but of quiet determination, carrying its hopes across the oceans toward a future it is still patiently shaping. By the time China stepped into the late 1990s and early 2000s, the quiet momentum set in motion by earlier reforms had begun, spreading far beyond the special economic zones. Opportunities that once existed only along the coastline started drifting inward, touching towns, cities, and provinces, deep in the heart of the country. But for this progress to reach everyone, something essential was needed. Connection, roads, bridges, railways, airports, communication networks. Simple words, yet powerful tools that could weave a massive, diverse nation into one unified tapestry. And so began one of the most remarkable periods of infrastructure development in modern history. Imagine China at this moment like a vast, ancient scroll gradually being unfurled. Beautiful, complex, and full of potential, but needing delicate lines of ink to link its landscapes together. These lines would become highways stretching across deserts, trains gliding over mountains, and new transportation networks binding distant communities into closer harmony. In the early 2000s, China made a deliberate decision to invest heavily in infrastructure, not as a luxury, but as a foundation. Leaders saw that growth could not be sustained if only coastal cities thrived. Farmers in the west, merchants in the north, students in the southwest. Everyone needed access, mobility, and opportunity. And so, work began quietly, but determinedly. Picture teams of engineers planning new rail routes across rugged terrain. Imagine surveyors walking through remote valleys, marking where bridges might one day stand. In cities, construction workers poured concrete at dawn, building the roadways that would soon carry trucks, buses, and families, traveling from one province to another. These were not just projects, they were threads, stitching together a nation of extraordinary size. One of the most transformative developments was the rise of China's high-speed rail system. Today, it is one of the largest and most advanced networks in the world. But in the beginning, it started as a simple idea. Trains that would travel faster, smoother, and farther than ever before. The first lines connected major cities in the east, but soon expanded rapidly toward the interior. Imagine boarding one of these early high-speed trains. The platform is clean, the air calm. Passengers step inside and find large windows offering views of countryside and cityscapes alike. As the train glides forward, the scenery moves in gentle motion fields. Rivers, villages, and hills passing like watercolor paintings beneath a drifting brush. What once took days now took hours. Journeys that separated families now became routine visits. Business, education, tourism, all became easier, more accessible, more connected. Alongside the railways, highways began to stretch across the land. The National Expressway Network, planned with patience and precision, linked all of China's major regions. Drivers could now travel from Beijing to Shanghai, from Guangzhou to Kunming, from inland towns to coastal ports, all through roads built with care. These highways were not only pathways for vehicles, they became pathways for ideas, trade, and cultural exchange. Bridges rose over wide rivers, some of them among the longest in the world. Tunnels carved through mountains. Airports expanded, welcoming increasing numbers of domestic and international travelers. Ports modernized, allowing goods to move more quickly and efficiently than ever before. Bit by bit, China's map grew detailed with new routes, each one representing connection, possibility, and future growth. But infrastructure is not only about transportation. Another revolution was unfolding quietly, almost invisibly. The spread of communication networks. In the 1990s, telephones were limited and computers were rare. But in the 2000s, mobile technology began to reach millions. Cell towers appeared in cities and countryside alike, allowing families to stay connected across great distances. Text messages replaced letters. Phone calls brought warmth to homes separated by provinces. Then came the internet. At first, it was slow, unfamiliar, and limited to universities and government institutions. But soon, internet cafes appeared in countless towns, glowing softly with blue computer screens late into the night. Young people gathered to explore this new digital world, discovering information, music, and entertainment from across the globe. Universities built computer labs. Businesses moved their operations online. Government services became more efficient. The digital bridge, once a narrow pathway, widened into a powerful network connecting hundreds of millions of people. As infrastructure expanded, daily life transformed in gentle but profound ways. A farmer in Sichuan could send produce to markets in Shanghai. A student in a small city could apply to a university in Beijing. Families separated by work could reunite more often, thanks to high-speed trains that shrank long distances. Travelers could explore regions they once only heard about in stories. Commerce flowed more smoothly, and regions that were once considered remote now experienced economic growth. Yet amidst all these changes, the spirit of community remained strong. In small towns along new highways, shops opened to serve travelers with warm meals and local specialties. Villagers watched construction with curiosity, discussing how new roads might bring visitors, jobs, and new experiences. In cities, people marveled at the speed and efficiency of public transportation, feeling a sense of pride as their country grew more connected and modern. China's leadership often spoke of a phrase during this time: "If you want to prosper, build roads first." It was a simple idea, but with deep truth. Roads, railways, and communication networks were not just physical structures. They were bridges to opportunity, equality, and shared development. Consider the western provinces, once long distances from centers of growth. With the Go West initiative, highways crawled across mountains, airports opened in high-altitude cities, and railways linked regions that had been geographically isolated for centuries. For the first time, children from remote areas could travel easily to universities far away. Local businesses could send products to new markets. Tourists could explore breathtaking landscapes previously difficult to reach. And in the background, almost unnoticed, a new feeling settled across the nation. Unity, not the loud, ceremonial kind, but the quiet security that comes from knowing the country is becoming more accessible, more connected, more whole. As this chapter comes to a peaceful close, imagine standing at a high-speed rail station at dusk. Trains glide in and out like gentle shadows. The warm lights reflect on polished floors. Families roll their suitcases, travelers sip tea, and destinations flash across screens. Beijing, Shenzhen, Chongqing, Wuhan. The air carries the soft hum of movement, not frantic, but steady, coordinated, and filled with purpose. This is China, building a connected nation, a place where roads and rails are more than metal and stone. They are pathways that bring people together, nurture opportunity, and quietly shape the future with every kilometer laid. As China moved deeper into the 21st century, a transformation began to unfold, one that did not rise from steel rails or concrete highways, but from something lighter, invisible, and quietly powerful. It emerged not from smokestacks or factories, but from signals carried through the air and wires buried beneath the ground. This was the beginning of China's digital revolution, a shift so gentle that many did not notice its arrival, yet so profound that it would reshape daily life for hundreds of millions of people. Imagine the early 2000s. Across China, families continued their routines, children walking to school, grandparents practicing gentle morning exercises in parks, shopkeepers opening their stores with soft greetings. Life remained grounded in familiar rhythms. But somewhere in the background, in offices, classrooms, and even living rooms, glowing screens began appearing. A quiet blue light, a dial-up tone, a small device resting in someone's hand. These were the first signs of a new era. At first, digital tools were rare. Computers were found mostly in universities, government buildings, and a few homes in major cities. Internet cafes appeared in bustling streets, filled with rows of computers humming softly through the night. Young people gathered there after school, exploring a world beyond their neighborhoods, reading news from distant countries, discovering music and games, chatting with friends through early messaging platforms. The internet was new, exciting, mysterious, and full of possibility. As technology improved, China began building one of the world's most extensive digital infrastructures. Fiber optic cables stretched across vast distances, connecting remote villages with major cities. Mobile networks expanded quickly, allowing people to make calls and send text messages from almost anywhere. Each year, the number of users grew quietly but steadily. The digital world, once a narrow doorway, became a wide and welcoming gateway. Then, something extraordinary happened. Mobile phones became affordable. At first, they were simple devices, used mostly for calls and messages, but their presence changed the rhythm of communication. A son working far from home could speak to his mother every evening. A traveler could send a quick message from a train. Families once separated by distance now felt closer, comforted by the sound of a familiar voice just a few taps away. When smartphones arrived, the transformation deepened, like dusk turning into night. Touchscreens glowed in millions of hands. Apps appeared, small icons that opened entire worlds. Slowly, seamlessly, people began doing things differently. Instead of carrying cash, they used digital wallets. Instead of waiting in long lines, they paid bills online. Instead of traveling to distant shops, they browsed on their phones and had items delivered to their doorsteps. E-commerce blossomed in this new landscape. Platforms emerged that connected countless sellers and buyers, from large companies to small vendors in rural towns. A shopkeeper in a mountain village could sell handmade crafts to customers hundreds of kilometers away. Farmers could live stream from their fields, showing fresh produce directly to online viewers. Delivery workers traveled through streets, alleys, and countryside paths, bringing packages to homes that once felt unreachable. This digital marketplace was not just convenient, it was transformative, giving people new opportunities and new connections. Meanwhile, digital payments quietly replaced traditional cash transactions. QR codes appeared everywhere, on cafe tables, street vendor stalls, taxi windows, and market stands. A simple scan allowed anyone to pay instantly, safely, and easily. Even elders, once hesitant, learned to use these tools with the help of younger family members. Daily life became smoother, less burdened by coins and bills. The digital economy, once imagined as a distant future, had arrived softly into everyday routines. Technology also reshaped transportation. Apps allowed people to call taxis, rent bikes, and navigate growing cities with ease. Electric scooters lined sidewalks, ready to help commuters travel short distances. Transportation networks, once complex, became more accessible with real-time maps and digital ticketing. The movement of millions of people became more efficient, a quiet orchestration made possible by code and signals. Behind all these visible changes was another transformation, one happening inside laboratories, universities, and research centers. China had begun investing deeply in fields such as artificial intelligence, robotics, renewable energy, and advanced manufacturing. Scientists studied algorithms late into the night, engineers assembled prototypes on glowing workbenches, and young graduates joined tech companies with dreams of building the next breakthrough. Innovation hubs emerged in cities like Beijing, Shenzhen, and Hangzhou. These places pulsed with energy, yet lacked the chaos often associated with rapid growth. Instead, they carried an atmosphere of focused creativity. Researchers holding calm meetings, designers sketching quietly, programmers typing into the soft glow of their monitors. From these rooms emerged technologies that would shape not only China, but the world. Facial recognition systems, smart logistics networks, digital payment structures, and artificial intelligence applications that guided everything from traffic flow to energy management. But perhaps the most remarkable part of China's digital transformation was how deeply it touched ordinary life. A grandmother in a rural village could now video call her grandchildren in the city. A student could take online classes from anywhere with an internet signal. A small business owner could manage orders, finances, and customer service entirely from a phone. The digital world blended gently into the physical one, not replacing it, but enhancing it, making tasks easier, more accessible, and more connected. With digital platforms came new forms of community. People shared recipes, stories, music, and memories online. Enthusiasts created groups for photography, gardening, history, and countless other interests. Creators live-streamed their artwork and performances. Viewers sent messages of support, forming friendships that spanned provinces. The digital realm became a place not only of commerce, but of connection. A quiet gathering space for millions. As this chapter draws to a close, imagine a modern Chinese city at night. The skyline glows in soft shades of blue and white. Skyscrapers shine like lanterns rising toward the stars. In countless homes, screens cast gentle light across rooms where families sit together. Some watching movies, some video calling relatives, some reading articles or scrolling through photos. Outside, delivery scooters hum down quiet streets, guided by maps glowing softly on phone screens. The digital age has arrived, not with noise or chaos, but with calm, steady light. A transformation built not of stone or steel, but of connections, ideas, and invisible pathways. A transformation that lifted China into a new era, one of innovation, access, and endless possibility. As China stepped deeper into the 21st century, its transformation was no longer driven only by roads, rails, or digital networks. A quieter, more profound shift began unfolding in classrooms, laboratories, and libraries across the nation. This was a transformation of the mind, a renewal of learning, curiosity, and discovery. If China's modern rise was a great river, then its investment in education and research was the clear spring that fed it, quietly strengthening the current year after year. Imagine a university campus early in the morning. Dew glistens on green lawns, bicycles line the pathways, and students walk calmly toward their lectures with books tucked under their arms. The air is filled with a soft anticipation, a sense that, within these walls, new ideas are forming, waiting to shape the world. This scene, once rare, began appearing across China in countless cities, as education became a central pillar of national development. Following decades of reconstruction and gradual opening, China understood that true progress required more than buildings and machines. It required people well-trained, well-educated, and inspired to think, create, and innovate. And so, enormous effort was placed into expanding and improving the education system from the ground up. In primary schools, millions of children began learning from newly updated textbooks. Lessons grew more interactive. Classrooms became better equipped, and teachers received expanded training. Villages that once had only one small school now found themselves connected to the larger educational network of the country. Children who used to walk miles to attend class could now study closer to home, following a curriculum designed to build a strong foundation in literacy, mathematics, and the natural sciences. As these students grew older, secondary schools offered more opportunities than ever before. Laboratories allowed them to conduct experiments. Libraries provided modern textbooks, and extracurricular activities encouraged creativity and teamwork. In cities, students participated in science competitions, language programs, and technology clubs. In rural areas, scholarships helped talented young people continue their studies, breaking barriers that once limited their futures. Universities underwent a transformation as well. Institutions like Tsinghua University, Peking University, Fudan University, Jijing University, and many others expanded rapidly. Their campuses grew larger, their facilities more advanced, and their academic programs broader. Professors from around the world joined as visiting scholars. International partnerships blossomed. Students, once confined to local classrooms, now had opportunities to study abroad or participate in global exchange programs. Inside these universities, a new spirit of research began to bloom. Laboratories filled with the quiet hum of machinery. Students ran experiments late into the night, adjusting instruments, recording data, and analyzing results under the soft glow of desk lamps. The atmosphere was calm but purposeful, a reflection of a nation embracing the importance of knowledge. China invested heavily in fields that would shape the future: engineering, computer science, medicine, biotechnology, renewable energy, and space exploration. Funding supported research teams that worked patiently on long-term challenges. New academic centers were built, offering specialized facilities for advanced study. Young scholars were encouraged to explore ambitious ideas, and many did. One of the most symbolic areas of progress was China's space program. Engineers and scientists worked steadily to develop satellites, space laboratories, and human spaceflight capabilities. These achievements were not celebrated with loud triumph, but with quiet pride, the kind that comes from years of patient effort. When China launched its first astronauts, the nation watched with calm excitement, recognizing that this was only the beginning of a long journey into the cosmos. Another area deeply shaped by education and research was medicine. Universities and hospitals collaborated to develop new techniques in surgery, diagnostics, and pharmaceuticals. Medical students trained in modern facilities, while researchers worked to understand diseases and improve treatments. Public health campaigns grew more effective, supported by scientific data and better trained professionals. Meanwhile, technology research flourished. In cities like Shenzhen and Hangzhou, innovation hubs emerged where young engineers worked on robotics, artificial intelligence, and smart technologies. These environments were peaceful, but buzzing with creativity. People gathered in shared workspaces, sharing ideas over warm cups of tea, sketching solutions on whiteboards, and building prototypes that would one day affect millions. China also recognized the importance of international collaboration. Thousands of students traveled abroad each year to study in universities across Europe, North America, and Asia. They returned with new skills, fresh perspectives, and expanded worldviews. At the same time, foreign scholars came to China, participating in joint research, teaching courses, and fostering intellectual exchange. These connections formed a global network that helped China integrate its knowledge systems with the rest of the world. In rural areas, technological advancement brought improvements in education as well. Satellite classes allowed experts from major universities to teach students in remote regions. E-learning platforms appeared, making high-quality lessons accessible from villages nestled among mountains, deserts, and grasslands. Tablets and computers arrived in schools that once struggled to maintain chalkboards. Education became not just a privilege, but a right, a bridge toward opportunity and empowerment. Throughout this period, China understood that progress comes not only from training professionals, but from nurturing curiosity. Museums grew more modern, filled with interactive exhibits on science, space, environment, and history. Public libraries expanded their collections and provided quiet, comfortable spaces for people to read, study, or simply think. Community centers offered adult education courses, allowing people of all ages to learn new skills. All of this contributed to a growing sense of possibility, a belief that knowledge, when nurtured and shared, becomes a powerful force for national development. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this transformation was that it happened gently, like the slow opening of a flower. Quietly, patiently, deliberately, China invested in minds, in futures, in the dreams of millions of young people. The country understood that innovation does not arise suddenly. It grows from years of learning, practice, and curiosity cultivated in classrooms, laboratories, and homes. As this chapter draws to a close, imagine standing outside a modern Chinese university at dusk. The sky is deepening to a soft blue. Students walk along tree-lined paths, discussing their studies in calm voices. Light glows from dormitory windows. Laboratories remain active, their windows shining gently in the night. A soft breeze rustles the leaves. It is peaceful, quiet, yet full of promise. This is China investing in knowledge, not loudly, not hurriedly, but with steady, thoughtful dedication, building the intellectual foundations for the future that now gently unfolds. As the new century unfolded, China entered a moment unlike any other in its long history. For thousands of years, the rhythm of Chinese life had been shaped primarily by the countryside. Fields of rice swayed gently beneath the sun. Families lived in close-knit byakas, and generations followed the familiar cycles of planting and harvest. But now, a subtle shift was beginning. A movement that would reshape communities, dreams, and daily routines. It was the Great Urban Migration, a quiet river of humanity flowing toward China's growing cities. In the 1990s, only a small portion of the population lived in large urban centers. Most people still called the countryside home. But as new industries emerged and opportunities expanded, millions began to consider a new possibility. Building their futures in modern cities filled with lights, jobs, and possibilities. At first, the migration was slow, almost hesitant, like the early drift of a tide. Young people left their villages to work in factories or study in colleges. They traveled by bus or train, carrying simple bags, their hearts full of both excitement and uncertainty. Imagine one of these early journeys. A young man or woman sits by a train window, watching green fields roll past and feeling the gentle sway of the carriage. The rail line stretches into the distance, leading toward a world they have never seen. A world of skyscrapers, crowded streets, and endless movement. For many, this journey marked the beginning of a new life, a peaceful but profound transition from rural simplicity to urban possibility. As it is grew, their skylines began to change. Buildings rose quietly, one floor at a time, guided by cranes that stood like patient guardians above the horizon. Roads expanded, public parks were built, and new neighborhoods appeared where empty land had once been. In the evenings, warm lights shimmered from thousands of windows, turning the city into a constellation of human stories. Shanghai, with its twisting Huangpu River, grew into a global metropolis, blending historic districts with futuristic towers. Beijing expanded its subway lines, connecting ancient temples with modern business centers. Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Chengdu, Chongqing, each developed its own rhythm, culture, and identity. China's cities became mosaics of tradition and innovation, where old alleyways stood alongside modern shopping streets, and where families practiced Tai Chi at dawn in public parks, surrounded by glass towers. For many rural migrants, life in the city was an adjustment. Apartments were smaller, streets busier, and the pace of life much faster. Yet, there was a quiet excitement in discovering new routines. Workers found jobs in factories, construction sites, restaurants, and offices. Students studied in universities filled with resources they had never imagined. Families who had once lived in simple courtyard homes now explored supermarkets, malls, and modern housing communities. Cities also became places where cultures blended. Migrants brought their hometown traditions, local foods, festivals, dialects, creating new cultural layers within the urban environment. A person walking through a modern Chinese city might hear accents from distant provinces, smell dishes from dozens of regions, and see celebrations reflecting centuries-old customs. Though the surroundings were new, the heart of Chinese culture remained deeply present. As China continued to develop, living standards in cities improved steadily. New modes of transportation, buses, metro lines, high-speed trains made commuting smoother. Sidewalks filled with bicycles, electric scooters, and families strolling in the cool of the evening. Children played in modern playgrounds as grandparents rested on park benches beneath leafy trees. Urban life, though busy, maintained a softness, a sense of community, and a rhythm shaped by daily rituals. Housing also experienced a transformation. In earlier decades, many families lived in shared spaces, sometimes with several generations under one roof. But new developments offered modern apartments, complete with elevators, heating systems, and greenery between buildings. These housing communities often included small shops, clinics, and gardens, quiet spaces where neighbors greeted one another, shared meals, and watched children grow up together. Workplaces evolved, too. Office towers rose in financial districts, where employees typed emails beneath soft, warm lighting. Factories became more technologically advanced, quieter, and more efficient. Service industries flourished, offering new roles in hospitality, retail, and technology. This shift created broader opportunities, especially for women, who increasingly entered professions across business, education, and healthcare. At the same time, China maintained a deep connection to its rural roots. During holidays, millions of urban workers made their way back to their hometowns, creating the world's largest annual human migration. Trains filled with families carrying gifts and suitcases, eager to reunite with parents, grandparents, and childhood friends. These journeys were reminders that while cities offered opportunity, the countryside offered memory, a place where old rhythms still lived quietly under open skies. In some regions, rural life also began to change. Improved infrastructure brought better schools, healthcare, and digital access. Farmers embraced new techniques and technologies. Some rural villages developed ecotourism projects or local specialty industries, allowing families to prosper without leaving their homes. This balanced urban expansion alongside rural development became one of China's most important goals. Meanwhile, modern cities cultivated a new cultural renaissance. Art museums opened, theaters hosted orchestras and opera performances, and contemporary artists found inspiration in the contrast between ancient traditions and modern landscapes. Writers, filmmakers, musicians, and designers contributed to a growing cultural presence that reached audiences both in China and abroad. Despite all the noise and energy of urban environments, cities also offered spaces of peace. Early mornings were filled with soft music from speakers in public squares, guiding elderly residents through gentle exercises. Lakes and city parks reflected the rising sun. Tea houses, tucked away between modern buildings, offered moments of quiet reflection. Even nighttime carried its own calm, a tranquil hush settling over the streets after the day's bustle. As we close this chapter, imagine standing on a balcony overlooking a modern Chinese city at night. The air is cool, lights flicker in every direction. Far below, cars move slowly along wide boulevards, their headlights gliding like soft ribbons of light. In apartments, families gather for dinner. In dormitories, students review their notes. In offices, a few workers finish their tasks before heading home. And across the city, millions of stories continue quietly, peacefully, shaping the future one day at a time. This is China. As urban shift, a gentle, steady transformation that carried millions from rural landscapes to modern cities, weaving tradition and modern life into a single, vibrant tapestry. As China's cities grew taller and brighter, and as modern life flowed through streets filled with buses, cafes, and neon lights, one might imagine that the ancient spirit of Chinese culture would fade into the background. But in truth, something quite different happened. Instead of being overshadowed, China's traditions began to gently reawaken, weaving themselves into the rhythms of modern life like threads of silk stitched into new fabric. The nation did not abandon its cultural heritage. It renewed it, reinterpreted it, and allowed it to bloom once again, in harmony with the 21st century. Imagine walking through a modern Chinese city in the early morning. Glass towers glimmer in the soft sunlight. Buses hum quietly along the roads, and commuters hurry to work. Yet beneath a grove of trees in a peaceful park, a small group practices Tai Chi. Their movements are slow, deliberate, flowing like water. As they shift from one posture to another, they carry with them thousands of years of philosophy, balance, harmony, and calm. This scene, modest yet powerful, captures the essence of China's cultural renewal. Ancient wisdom thriving quietly amidst modern change. After decades of rapid development, many people began longing for a return to cultural roots. Families encouraged children to learn traditional arts, calligraphy, classical music, painting, dance, and martial arts. Schools reintroduced lessons on Confucian philosophy, not as strict doctrine, but as gentle guidance on ethics, family, and community. Temples, once quiet and worn, were restored with care, their red pillars repainted, their courtyards filled with the soft scent of incense. Visitors, both young and old, walked through these sacred spaces with peaceful steps, reconnecting with traditions that had shaped Chinese identity for centuries. One of the most visible cultural renewals occurred in architecture. While modern skyscrapers reached impressive heights, architects also turned to classical designs for inspiration. Rooftops curved like waves, echoing ancient palaces. Courtyards reappeared in new housing complexes as serene communal spaces. Gardens featuring ponds, bamboo, and stone pathways appeared in urban centers, offering moments of stillness amid bustling city life. Old neighborhoods, once destined for demolition, were instead preserved or restored, their narrow lanes, lanterns, and wooden doors becoming bridges between past and present. In cities like Beijing, restored hutangs became lively cultural districts. Traditional courtyard homes opened as tea houses, craft shops, and small museums. Elderly residents chatted under leafy trees, while young people photographed ancient architectural details with their modern smartphones. The blending of generations, traditions, and technologies became a signature rhythm of the cultural renaissance. Music and performing arts also blossomed. Classical instruments like the guzheng, erhu, and pipa found new audiences through concerts, online videos, and fusion performances that combined ancient melodies with modern arrangements. Opera traditions, Behin opera kung opera, and regional styles experienced the revival. Younger performers trained diligently to preserve these art forms, while creative directors blended traditional elements with contemporary storytelling. In theaters across China, audiences sat in hushed admiration as centuries-old tales unfolded with a fresh sense of life. Calligraphy, once considered an old-fashioned pastime, re-emerged as a beloved hobby. Workshops opened in cities, where people practiced brushstrokes dipped in ink, as black and smooth as night. The slow rhythm of writing characters became a form of meditation, a way to escape the fast pace of digital life. The ancient belief that handwriting reveals the inner spirit resonated quietly with new generations seeking mindfulness. Food, too, became a powerful expression of cultural continuity. Traditional dishes, passed down through families, were rediscovered and celebrated. Regional cuisines, Sichuan, Cantonese, Hunan, Shandong, Onwei, Fujian, and Manimore, enjoyed a renaissance. Cooking shows, recipe apps, and culinary festivals introduced these flavors to wider audiences. Vendors in ancient-style markets sold handmade noodles, steamed buns, mooncakes, and delicate pastries. Restaurants recreated classical dining experiences, with soft lantern light and gentle music creating atmospheres reminiscent of dynasties long past. Philosophy found its way back into everyday conversation as well. The teachings of Confucius, once confined to textbooks, became touchstones for understanding modern life. Concepts like filial piety, social harmony, and self-cultivation offered comfort in a rapidly changing world. Taoist ideas about balance and flowing with nature inspired wellness practices, eco-friendly designs, and spiritual retreats. Even in workplaces, managers encouraged principles like cooperation, calmness, and respect, recognizing that ancient wisdom still carried relevance in modern teams. Festivals became moments of collective cultural celebration. The Lunar New Year filled cities with red lanterns, paper cuttings, and the comforting smells of homemade dishes. Mid-Autumn Festival brought families together to share mooncakes beneath the soft glow of the full moon. Dragon Boat Festival revived ancient river races, with teams rowing in rhythm to drums echoing across lakes. Young children, dressed in traditional outfits, learned the stories behind these festivals, connecting them to their heritage with joy and curiosity. The revival of Chinese clothing traditions also became a gentle movement. Hanfu, traditional attire inspired by historical dynasties, reappeared in parks, streets, and photography studios. Young people wore flowing robes, embroidered with patterns of clouds, blossoms, and cranes. Wearing these garments was not about returning to the past, but about embracing cultural identity with pride and creativity. Meanwhile, literature and film explored new ways of honoring the past. Writers blended modern themes with traditional settings. Filmmakers created stories inspired by ancient legends, dynasties, and philosophies. Television dramas set in imperial courts drew millions of viewers who found comfort in the elegance and symbolism of old Chinese aesthetics. These works connected the modern viewer with the ancient storyteller, allowing cultures to converse across time. Yet perhaps the most profound aspect of China's cultural renewal was its peaceful nature. It was not forced, rushed, or dramatic. It grew gently, like a lotus rising from still water. People rediscovered traditions out of affection, curiosity, and a desire for meaning. The renewal did not replace modernity. It softened it, enriching it, balancing it. As this chapter comes to a close, imagine evening settling over a Chinese city. Neon lights glow, traffic hums softly in the distance, and above the rooftops, the moon shines with ancient calm. In a quiet courtyard, a calligrapher practices slow, graceful strokes. In a park nearby, a musician plays a gentle melody on the air. A family lights a lantern outside their home, honoring a festival that has been celebrated for generations. And across the city, millions of people live modern lives while carrying within them the timeless spirit of their culture. Tesis China, renewing tradition in a modern world, gently weaving the past into the present, preserving wisdom while embracing change. As China journeyed deeper into the 21st century, the digital world that had once been a promise slowly began to take shape around every aspect of daily life. What started as a simple network of computers and mobile devices gradually transformed into something far more profound: a digital community. A space where millions of people, regardless of distance or background, found ways to connect, share, create, and express themselves. It was a transformation not made of steel or stone, but of messages, screens, and invisible signals flowing gently through the air. Imagine a quiet evening in a modern Chinese home. A family gathers around their dining table, sharing a warm meal. Nearby, a smartphone lights up softly with a message from a relative living hundreds of kilometers away. Moments later, a video call connects the entire family, faces smiling and familiar. Laughter flows through the screen, bridging cities, towns, and neighborhoods. This simple scene, repeated millions of times, captures the heart of China's digital community. Connection, closeness, and the quiet joy of being together despite distance. In earlier decades, communication was slow and limited. Letters traveled for days, sometimes weeks. Phone calls were expensive and infrequent. But now, with smartphones and nearly every hand and mobile networks reaching nearly every village, communication became seamless. A grandmother in a remote mountain village could see her grandson studying in Shanghai. Parents working in coastal cities could read bedtime stories to their children back home through the soft glow of a screen. These moments, though small, carried immense meaning. They brought comfort, reduced loneliness, and nurtured relationships across vast landscapes. As the internet expanded, social platforms emerged, digital spaces where people created communities based on shared interests, hobbies, and stories. Young photographers posted images of misty mountains, city skylines, and bustling night markets. Food enthusiasts shared recipes from home provinces, spicy Sichuan dishes, delicate cantonais, c'est dim sum hearty northern noodles. Calligraphy lovers exchanged videos of brushstrokes gliding across paper. History enthusiasts posted short retellings of ancient tales. Each post, each message, each comment added another thread to the rich, virtual tapestry of China's digital culture. Live streaming became one of the most remarkable phenomena in this digital evolution. From studios, cafes, dorm rooms, and even village fields, millions of creators streamed their lives for curious audiences. Some sang songs, their voices soft and soothing. Others cooked meals while chatting gently with viewers. Farmers live-streamed harvests, picking fresh apples or tea leaves as watchers asked questions and placed orders in real time. Craftsmen demonstrated traditional skills, pottery, embroidery, paper cutting, reviving old art forms through modern platforms. These live streams were more than entertainment. They became bridges between rural and urban China, offering opportunities to small businesses and helping communities grow economically. Entire villages revitalized themselves by sharing their local specialties online. Honey, bamboo shoots, handmade tools, woven baskets. The digital world turned remote regions into bustling marketplaces, filled with laughter, storytelling, and connection. E-commerce platforms flourished alongside this digital community. With just a few taps, people could order groceries, clothes, books, and home items delivered straight to their door. Delivery workers traveled through cities, rain or shine, bringing packages to apartments, offices, and small shops. In remote areas, electric scooters hummed along narrow roads, carrying parcels to households that had once been isolated. The digital and physical worlds blended seamlessly, creating convenience and opportunity. Technology also reshaped friendships. Groups of students who had once separated after graduation now remained connected through group chats filled with jokes, photos, and late-night conversations. Elderly neighbors joined online community groups to share gardening tips and health advice. Parents accessed digital forums filled with stories and guidance about raising children. Communities that once existed only in person now thrived online, expanding beyond geography. Another part of China's digital community blossomed in the realm of creativity. Artists shared drawings, dancers posted choreography, musicians uploaded melodies inspired by ancient tunes, and writers shared reflective stories, sometimes short enough to read in a single quiet moment. Many creators, once unknown, found audiences who appreciated their talent. Support flowed not through applause in traditional theaters, but through gentle comments, digital gifts, and loyal followings. Creativity became democratized, accessible, celebrated, and encouraged. Gaming communities also grew. Millions found comfort in playing games together, exploring virtual landscapes, solving puzzles, building worlds, and chatting while drifting through digital adventures. These experiences, though virtual, offered companionship and relaxation, knitting people together through shared enjoyment. Even daily routines changed. People used digital tools to pay bills, check health appointments, book transportation, and complete errands with minimal effort. Libraries digitized their collections, allowing anyone to read ancient texts or modern novels on a phone. Doctors provided consultations through video calls. Teachers taught online classes to students in distant provinces, spreading knowledge across mountains and deserts. The digital world offered not only convenience, but equal access. Yet, despite its vastness, the digital community carried a sense of warmth and intimacy. During festivals, families sent animated greetings, adorned with red lanterns and flowers. During the Mid-Autumn Festival, people shared pictures of the moon from different cities, reminding one another that no matter where they stood, they all looked at the same sky. During Lunar New Year, digital red envelopes filled with virtual blessings passed between friends and family. Tradition found a new home in the digital space, gently carried forward by technology. Of course, the digital world also encouraged mindfulness. Many people used meditation apps to unwind, listening to soft music or tranquil nature sounds before sleep. Others watched calming videos of tea ceremonies, slow painting, or traditional instruments playing under the glow of lantern light. The digital realm, often seen as fast-paced, also became a sanctuary of peace for those seeking rest and reflection. As we near the end of this chapter, imagine a Chinese city at night, a blend of ancient and modern, glowing softly beneath stars. In thousands of homes, screens illuminate gentle conversations, shared memories, and digital embraces. People laugh, learn, connect, and dream, not just through physical presence, but through signals crossing mountains, rivers, and skies. TC's China's digital community, not a cold network of devices, but a warm, living space shaped by human connection. A place where tradition finds new voice, where creativity and where millions are brought closer, gently, through the quiet power of technology. As China moved confidently into the 21st century, a new realization began to take shape across the nation. A recognition that true progress is not measured solely by towering buildings, bustling cities, or economic milestones. It is also measured by the quality of air breathed each morning, the clarity of rivers flowing through mountain valleys, the shade of ancient forests, and the peaceful balance between human growth and the natural world. And so, China began turning its gaze towards something essential and timeless. The environment. For centuries, Traditional Chinese culture had carried deep reverence for nature. Ancient poets wrote lovingly of misty mountains, quiet bamboo groves, lotus ponds, and rivers glowing beneath the moon. Philosophers taught that humans and nature were deeply interconnected, bound together like two threads woven into the same fabric. But with rapid industrialization, some of these natural spaces had become strained, and China, with thoughtful reflection, set out to restore harmony. The journey toward a greener future began gently, like a soft wind stirring through leaves. Policies were introduced to protect forests, lakes, and wetlands. Millions of trees were planted across regions that had once been barren. Farmers, students, and workers volunteered to help, digging small holes in the soft earth and placing seedlings inside with care. These trees, routed by hands young and old, would one day grow into vast forests that cooled the air, sheltered wildlife, and restored balance to the land. One of the most remarkable examples of this effort was the creation of large-scale reforestation programs. In northern China, where sandstorms once swept through villages and cities, forests began to expand year after year. Hills that were once dry and dusty gradually turned green, covered in rows of new trees that held the soil together and invited birds and insects to return. Locals spoke of how the winds grew softer, the air cleaner, and the land more alive. This transformation was slow, patient, and full of quiet beauty. At the same time, China devoted itself to cleaner energy. Solar panels began appearing across the countryside, stretching like shining fields beneath the sun. Entire photovoltaic farms were built in deserts, transforming sunlight into electricity that powered homes and factories. Wind turbines rose along mountain ridges and coastlines, their blades turning gracefully, generating energy with nothing more than the power of passing air. Hydropower facilities utilized flowing rivers, blending engineering with the natural movement of water. In many cities, the shift toward renewable energy created visible changes. Streetlights were powered by solar panels. Electric bicycles buzzed gently along bike paths. Charging stations for electric cars appeared in neighborhoods, parking lots, and public squares. People began purchasing eco-friendly vehicles, gliding through the streets with engines so quiet they sounded like whispers. This transition was not forced. It grew naturally from a shared desire for cleaner air and quieter, healthier urban life. Water conservation also became a central goal. In regions facing drought, new technologies helped farmers reduce waste by using drip irrigation systems. Reservoirs were cleaned and restored, and lakes were protected from pollution. Rivers that had lost their sparkle began to recover as communities and conservation groups worked together to protect their banks. Fishermen who had once struggled to find clean water saw fish return, breathing new life into age-old traditions. Cities, too, embraced green design. Urban planners created parks that served as both leisure spaces and natural defense systems against flooding. Green belts appeared along highways. Rooftop gardens sprouted on office buildings. In megacities like Shanghai, Chengdu, and Shenzhen, carefully designed green spaces offered oases of calm, where families gathered for picnics and elders practiced stretching exercises under the shade of trees. Public transportation also played an essential role in China's environmental journey. Subway systems expanded rapidly, offering millions of people clean, efficient ways to travel. Buses transitioned to electric or hybrid models, reducing emissions and noise. Bike-sharing programs became widely popular, filling cities with cheerful rows of brightly colored bicycles. These changes made urban life smoother and more breathable, reconnecting people with their surroundings. China's commitment to environmental protection extended beyond its borders as well. Scientists and researchers collaborated internationally, sharing knowledge about climate change, wildlife conservation, and green technology. China participated in global environmental agreements, promising to reduce emissions and invest in sustainable practices. These efforts signaled not only a national commitment but a global one, recognizing that the health of the planet transcends all borders. In rural areas, ecotourism began to flourish. Villages surrounded by natural beauty invited visitors to enjoy mountains, forests, lakes, and ancient pathways. Local residents built small guest houses, served traditional meals, and guided visitors through trails filled with wildflowers and birdsong. These eco-friendly industries brought new income while preserving the natural environment, allowing people to protect their land and share its beauty with travelers. Wildlife conservation also gained renewed attention. Natural reserves grew larger and more numerous, protecting pandas, cranes, snow leopards, and countless other species. Programs supported the restoration of habitats and the careful study of endangered animals. Rangers walked through forests and grasslands, ensuring that the delicate balance of ecosystems remained intact. Their work, often done quietly and without recognition, became a vital part of China's environmental commitment. Education played a gentle role in this movement as well. Schools organized tree planting days and cleanup events. Teachers guided students in understanding ecosystems, climate, and sustainability. Children learned to appreciate nature not just through textbooks, but through direct experience touching the bark of trees, studying insects in small jars, walking along riverbanks to observe the changing seasons. This generation grew up with a deeper awareness of their responsibility to the earth. All of these efforts, though varied and widespread, shared a common heartbeat: the understanding that progress and nature must grow together. China's journey toward a greener tomorrow was not loud or rushed. It unfolded slowly, season by season, policy by policy, action by action, like the gradual return of spring after a long winter. As this chapter draws to a close, imagine standing in a reforested valley in northern China. The breeze is cool, the leaves rustle softly, and sunlight filters through the branches, painting the ground in gentle patterns of gold and green. Birds sing quietly from the treetops. Nearby, a river flows with renewed clarity, its surface shimmering like silk. This serene landscape embodies China's environmental efforts, a reminder that, with patience, care, and collective effort, harmony with nature can be restored. This is China's journey toward a greener tomorrow, a thoughtful, steady path toward sustainability, a future where progress and nature coexist, like two friends walking side by side along a tranquil forest trail. By the early decades of the 21st century, China's transformation at home was unmistakable. High-speed trains stitched the nation together. Digital tools connected families across mountains and rivers. New forests grew where deserts once stretched. Cities blossomed with culture, innovation, and life. And yet, a quieter transformation was unfolding at the same time, one that reached far beyond China's borders. It was the story of China's gentle emergence on the world stage. This emergence wasn't defined by dramatic announcements or grand declarations. Instead, it grew steadily, like a tide rising inch by inch along a calm shoreline. China began building bridges, diplomatic, cultural, economic, and educational, connecting itself to the world not through force or noise, but through dialogue, cooperation, and soft influence. Imagine a long wooden table in a quiet meeting hall. Representatives from different countries sit together, sharing tea, exchanging notes, and discussing how to strengthen trade, education, and cultural ties. These meetings, often unnoticed by the wider world, formed the heart of China's diplomatic approach. Patient conversations, respectful listening, and gradual progress. China expanded its diplomatic presence slowly but surely. Embassies and consulates opened in more countries. International organizations welcomed Chinese participation in issues like public health, disaster relief, peacekeeping, and environmental cooperation. China began sending peacekeeping troops to United Nations missions, contributing to global stability. Engineers and doctors traveled abroad to share skills in places where help was needed. These actions were not loud gestures, they were quiet forms of partnership. Cultural exchange became an important part of this gentle emergence. Chinese language programs flourished around the world. Students from Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia attended classes in Mandarin, learning not only the language but the cultural nuances carried within each character and phrase. Confucius Institutes offered calligraphy workshops, musical performances, history seminars, and tea ceremonies. Through these activities, people far from China gained a calm, personal experience of its culture, one that went beyond stereotypes and headlines. Meanwhile, China welcomed more international students, researchers, and travelers. University campuses became global meeting grounds, where students from dozens of countries sat side by side, studying engineering, medicine, business, and the arts. They explored Chinese cities, tasted traditional dishes, and traveled to ancient sites filled with stories. Many returned home with warm memories, speaking of a nation far more nuanced and peaceful than they had imagined. In global trade, China's emergence was equally gentle, yet deeply influential. Ports across the world, from Southeast Asia to Africa to Europe, saw the steady arrival of ships carrying goods made in Chinese factories. Equally, Chinese buyers opened doors to imports from countless nations, buying fruit from South America, minerals from Africa, machinery from Europe, and technology from the United States. This flow of goods created quiet interdependence, weaving China into the economic patterns of countries near and far. Alongside trade came investment. Chinese companies, guided by long-term planning, invested in infrastructure projects abroad, building roads, bridges, ports, railways, power stations, and communication networks. These projects often supported developing regions, offering resources that could stimulate growth and stability. Local communities gained jobs, training, and improved transportation, while China built partnerships that strengthened mutual trust. These investments were not simply business ventures. They were forms of cooperation rooted in shared advancement. China's scientific community also stepped into global collaboration. Researchers partnered with international teams to study climate change, infectious diseases, renewable energy, astronomy, and agriculture. When natural disasters struck other nations, China sent rescue teams carrying medical supplies, tents, and equipment. These gestures reinforced the message. China wished to contribute not only to its own progress, but to the world's collective well-being. Cultural exports grew quietly but steadily. Chinese films traveled to international film festivals, showcasing stories of everyday life, ancient legends, and modern struggles. Musicians performed with orchestras abroad. Writers published books in multiple languages. Traditional arts, from ink painting to folk crafts, appeared in exhibitions across continents. Even modern creations like contemporary fashion, pop music, and animation found global audiences. These works helped people understand China not through politics, but through humanity, through art, emotion, and storytelling. Meanwhile, ordinary Chinese travelers explored the world more than ever before. Millions visited historic sites in Europe, national parks in America, markets in Africa, and beaches in Southeast Asia. They returned home with souvenirs, photographs, and memories of cultures different from their own. This exchange of experiences enriched China just as much as it enriched the places they visited. Technology also became a bridge connecting China to the world. Innovations in e-commerce, mobile payments, artificial intelligence, and electric vehicles caught international attention. Engineers from abroad visited China's tech hubs to learn from its rapid progress. Startups and research teams formed partnerships, sharing knowledge across continents. Yet, through all this expansion, China maintained a calm and steady presence, an approach rooted in patience. Rather than rushing to redefine global influence, China often described its role as walking forward step by step, learning from each cooperation. This gentle philosophy echoed the ancient wisdom of its culture. Progress should be balanced, respectful, and purposeful. China's emergence did not seek to replace or overpower others. Instead, it aimed to participate, contribute, and connect. It built relationships through shared interests, mutual respect, and long-term thinking. And as the world grew more interlinked, China's presence became quietly woven into global life and products. Technologies, cultural exchanges, scientific collaborations, and human interactions. As this chapter draws to a close, imagine standing at a harbor in a foreign land at dusk. A Chinese cargo ship rests quietly offshore, its lights reflecting on the water. Nearby, a restaurant serves Chinese tea to travelers. In a small university dormitory, foreign students practiced Mandarin together. In a remote village somewhere across the world, a bridge built with Chinese engineers stretches over a river. These scenes, calm, ordinary, yet filled with meaning, reflect China's gentle emergence on the world stage. Not loud, not forceful, but steady, thoughtful, and human. a presence carried through cooperation, culture, and connection, one gentle step at a time. As the story of modern China reaches this final chapter, it becomes clear that its remarkable journey is not defined by a single moment, a single achievement, or a single generation. Instead, it is a story shaped by countless quiet steps, by patience, long-term thinking, and the steady belief that growth is strongest when built with intention. The China we see today is not an endpoint, but a continuation, a river still flowing, carrying lessons from the past and hopes for the future. Imagine standing at the edge of a wide plain at dawn. The sky begins to glow softly, turning shades of peach and gold. In the distance, mountains stretch in calm silhouettes. A breeze moves across the land, gentle and cool. This is what China's future feels like. Not rushed, not sharp, but quietly unfolding, shaped by plans set decades ago and dreams that reach far into tomorrow. At the heart of China's future lies the same philosophy that guided its transformation, planning for the long journey rather than the short sprint. Leaders, communities, scholars, and innovators continue to look decades ahead, imagining cities that are greener, technologies that are smarter, and societies that are more balanced. They ask soft but important questions. How can we grow sustainably? How can we ensure harmony between tradition and progress? How can we uplift every region, every family, every generation? One of the defining features of China's path forward is its continued commitment to balanced development. In earlier years, growth concentrated near the coast. Now, that growth is spreading steadily across the interior. High-speed rail lines stretch deeper into the country, linking remote regions with major cities. New industries emerge in the west and northeast. Rural towns receive modern hospitals, schools, digital access, and clean energy. The goal is not rapid expansion, but equitable progress, ensuring that everyone, from mountain villages to bustling megacities, feels the warmth of development. Technology, which once reshaped daily life, is becoming a gentle guide for the future. Smart cities use digital tools to manage traffic, conserve energy, and improve public services. Artificial intelligence assists doctors in diagnosing illnesses. Teachers use virtual platforms to reach students in distant regions. Farmers monitor fields with drones that glide quietly over green landscapes. These innovations do not replace human effort. They support it, creating a future where life becomes smoother, healthier, and more connected. China's future also places great importance on cultural continuity. Even as skyscrapers rise, traditional festivals grow brighter, calligraphy classes filled with students. Ancient poems are recited on digital platforms. Designers blend historical motifs with modern fashion. The past is not fading. It is living, breathing, and gently evolving. Cultural heritage remains a compass, reminding the nation of its values, harmony, balance, compassion, and perseverance. Sustainability continues to guide China's long-term planning. Forests expand year by year. Solar and wind energy increase their share of the grid. Rivers and lakes are protected with care. Cities adopt greener transportation and cleaner technologies. The nation's goal is simple yet profound: to ensure that future generations inherit land that is not only prosperous, but healthy and whole. A place where they can breathe fresh air, drink clean water, and walk through forests filled with birdsong. International cooperation will remain a key part of China's future. The country understands that the world's challenge is climate change. Public health, technological ethics, scientific advancement requires shared effort, and so China continues to work with global partners, offering support where needed and learning from others in return. Its presence on the world stage is quiet, thoughtful, and built on dialogue rather than dominance. Economically, China's future emphasizes innovation, quality, and resilience. Advanced manufacturing grows more sophisticated. Entrepreneurs develop new digital tools. Researchers push toward breakthroughs in medicine, energy, and materials science. Small businesses thrive through online platforms. Rural entrepreneurs use live streaming to share products from their hometowns. The economy becomes more diverse, more flexibly, and more focused on long-term stability. But perhaps the most meaningful part of China's future is something less visible: the steady rise of everyday life. Children who grow up now may never know a world without digital classrooms, clean energy, fast trains, or quiet parks in the center of busy cities. They will learn ancient stories alongside modern science. They will celebrate traditional festivals while using the newest technologies. Their future will blend past and present with natural ease. Families continue to play a central role. Parents guide their children with love. Elders pass down wisdom through gentle conversations. Communities gather to celebrate birthdays, festivals, and milestones. Throughout China's rapid modernization, one truth has remained constant: the importance of togetherness. As the future unfolds, this sense of unity, flowing from Confucian values and centuries of cultural tradition, will remain a guiding force. As we near the end of this chapter, imagine once more that peaceful plain at dawn. The sun rises a little higher now, illuminating rivers, forests, cities, and villages. Trains glide through the landscape like quiet streaks of silver. Children walk to school with backpacks filled with dreams. Scientists enter laboratories humming with possibility. Farmers tend to fields nourished by modern tools. Artists sketch new visions inspired by ancient roots. And everywhere, life continuous, patient, steady, full of hope. China's journey into the future is not a race. It is a gentle walk shaped by planning, tradition, innovation, and care. Each step builds on the one before it. Each generation carries the dreams of the last while, planting seeds for the next. This long, thoughtful journey, guided by balance and wisdom, ensures that China's story continues, not with noise, but with quiet strength. And so, the journey goes on, not fast, not loud, but steady, calm, and full of purpose. A future built patiently, one peaceful step at a time. And so, dear listener, our quiet journey through the rise of modern China comes to a peaceful close. Thank you for spending this time with us, for listening, for reflecting, and for allowing history to settle softly into your evening. Here on Go to Sleep Historian, every story is told with a simple purpose: to bring calm to your mind, warmth to your thoughts, and a gentle sense of connection to the world's great histories, all in a spoken style designed to help you drift into deep, easy rest. And now, as our spoken story slowly fades, the second part of tonight's video will begin one full hour of relaxing sleep music, carefully selected to help your breathing slow, your thoughts grow lighter, and your dreams open peacefully. You don't have to do anything. Just let your eyes grow heavy, let your body soften into stillness, and allow the music to carry you the rest of the way. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and until we meet again in another nighttime story, may your sleep be deep, your night be gentle, and your dreams be filled with peace. Good night, dear listener, and rest well.